that the kind of supermajority I'm talking about, is 70%, believes that a resolution of the Arab-Israeli conflict is important, that it negatively affects American interests, that both Israelis and Palestinians are deserving of equal rights, and that there should be a Palestinian state. Majorities also believe, not supermajority, but a majority believe, that the U.S. president should get tough with Israel on settlements and steer a middle course between Israelis and Palestinians. When we ask that question is, we ask the question, does U.S. policy currently favor Israel, favor Palestinians, or steer a middle course? And invariably what you get is about 60–70% say it favors Israel. And then we ask the question, should U.S. policy favor Israel, favor Palestinians? And what we're getting is 3/4 say steer a middle course between the two. And finally, on the Arab front, what we're finding is that despite, again, the two wars in Gaza, the 2006 and the 2009, and then that rather devastating war in Lebanon, which took a real toll on Arab public opinion, that majorities, strong majorities, still favor the Arab peace plan and support a two-state solution, really without caveats, as the way forward. The trouble. The 2 points of troubling news in the poll that emerged. One is in the U.S. poll, which displays, even though there are those few questions I noted that have the supermajorities, you know, one of them is here, should there be an independent Palestinian state, and you can see all Americans 67% and the 17. When you get a number like that, what you're going to find is that it's going to follow across the board in all the subgroups, whatever they are, young, old, women, men, whatever. And it does. Catholics here, Protestants here, evangelicals there. The number of Jews is too small in a poll of that sort to come up with anything. But and Democrat, Republican, across the board. The problem is that those issues where there's a supermajority that I mentioned to you, one thing, but on too many other questions, there is a partisan split that is shocking. I mean, 70% Democrats on one side, 70% Republicans on the other side. And while I note, for example, that a majority say the president should get tough on settlements, it's a majority overall, but those who voted for Obama, 70% say get tough. Those who voted for John McCain say 71% not. The majority still come out in favor. But you do have, partly as a result of, I think, on the Republican side, the role of the religious right, partly the neoconservative philosophy of Bush and how it was projected for 8 years, and the identity that was created between our struggle with terrorism and Israel's struggle with terrorism. It did take a toll on some Republican thinking, and a partisan split of that nature, that deep, is not, I think, a good one to have in front of us when we have you know, sort of the kind of split that we do have. Certainly the Democrats have an edge, but it's not that big an edge that you can afford to split that deep. The Republicans of the Jim Baker and George H.W. Bush ilk don't seem to be in the driver's seat right now on that side of the aisle. The other troubling point is in the Arab world, and that is that there is a skepticism. They still will support it, but in particular in Egypt and in Jordan, the two countries that have peace with Israel, you get the sourest opinions right now, where there's a sense of, even with regard to something like President Obama's term in office to date and all of the outreach he's made to the Arab Muslim world, you get great numbers in Saudi Arabia, wonderful numbers in Morocco, people in Lebanon through the roof, and Kuwait, etc. It's in Egypt and Jordan that you get the most troubled views. And I think we cannot discount the fact that the last 8 years have taken a real toll. And taken a toll with regard to opinion, but also with regard to opinion toward America and its initiatives, towards Israel and its practices, and towards their own leadership and the ability of their leadership, having made an agreement with Israel, to deliver on that. So I think that there's there's, like I said, good news, but there's also some warning signs that we have to pay attention to and deal with as we move forward.
Thank you very much. And now, what people think here. Thank you. Thanks to everybody. It's really great to be here. When looking at public opinion data of American Jews, it's overwhelmingly clear that there's a big gap between conventional wisdom and what people really think. And that gap, I would say, one number that stood out in the two polls that we did was in July of '08 when we asked folks in the middle of the election, what are the two most important issues that you're going to be voting on in the presidential election and in the elections for Congress? And I was meeting with an Israeli professor recently and said, take a guess what the number was. Because I said, people are less and less focused on Israel. Jews are less and less focused on Israel. So it must be very low. It must be 50%. And I said, it's 8%. Anyway, so in the middle of this election, 8% of Jews said it was one of their top two issues. So 92% said it was not one of their top two issues. Now, the data I'm going to speak to is from two polls that we conducted for J Street, one in July of '08, one in March of '09. And what we see throughout is that there is overwhelming support among American Jews for an assertive American role, a leadership role to help resolve the conflict. And this is where I do get to this point that there's a big gap on issue after issue, and dynamic after dynamic between kind of conventional wisdom and where American Jews are as a broad constituency. We see that in the polls, what we did, in addition to just kind of getting a ceiling of support, and which is, our data reflects a lot of the stuff that's been set up here already. We also did an additional exercise where we pitted traditional hawkish arguments against traditional peace arguments. And the traditional peace arguments won by 15 to 20 points, both in July and in March. The idea of the March survey, in fact, was to gauge opinion on, to actually repeat several of the questions we did in July, because we had the military action in Gaza, we had significant change of government in the United States and significant change of government in Israel intervening. We wanted to see if these views that we had seen in July, which were very much supportive of aggressive American leadership, very, very strong views towards peace, if those held during these rather significant intervening events. And what we'll see is that that they did hold pretty good, little or no change whatsoever. And the additional purpose of the more recent poll was to get some of these evolving dynamics and see measure attitudes towards President Obama, attitudes towards the Gaza, the military action in Gaza, the rise of Avigdor Lieberman, as well as settlements. So there's a ton of data in this poll. I believe it's in the handouts. If not, it's on at jstreet.org/poll. And but I want to just provide 5 big takeaways that came away from the March poll. The first is the overwhelming support for Barack Obama. He has a 73% approval rating overall and a 72% approval rating when it comes to the Arab-Israeli conflict. Extraordinarily high. All of you would like your bosses to have approval ratings in that range within the constituency. This is a base constituency for